Let's get to the big geopolitical news breaking here in Washington. Let's put this up there on the screen. This one about Beijing planning a new training facility in Cuba, raising the prospect of Chinese troops on America's doorstep. Now, Crystal, it's not like foreign troops on Cuban soil has ever caused problems for the United States or a global crisis before. Currently, the Chinese and the Cubans are negotiating a joint military training facility. What they would establish is a, quote, advanced stage in terms of their negotiations. This is according to leaked U.S. intelligence reports that the Biden administration is effectively confirming. Now, the Biden administration says they have been contacting the Cubans to forestall the deal and are seeking to tap into what they think could be Cuban concerns about ceding their own sovereignty. Beijing is selling the training facility on top of potential ties, that they could deepen with the Cubans. It also highlights an interesting theoretical question around diplomacy that I've seen raised in terms of the experts around this issue. It could be that the Cubans are actually more considering this Chinese overture as they did during the times of the Soviet Union, because they feel that the U.S. political system is so intractable whenever it comes to a Cuban embargo and to trade, that this could be a way to extend leverage and actually get some better dealings with Washington. Personally, I think it's probably very entrenched because of the way that Florida rolls in our politics. That said, it does show you, though, a complex possible geopolitical crisis that could be ignited over this. Troops itself is not going to cause, the same thing as the Cuban Missile Crisis, of course, that was around missiles. That said, it's something that we are probably right to be concerned about, and also just highlights like what ratcheting up tensions with China is going to look like in our hemisphere.
Yeah.
And that this is really like the jump off point for something like that.
Well, with regard to, potentially Cuba using this as leverage to gain better status or reduce sanctions or whatever, with regard to the Cubans using this as potential leverage, Ryan has been making a good point, which is that, Florida's not a swing state anymore. Florida's a red state. And so the reason why, we have all these corn subsidies is because Iowa and the role it plays in the primary process. The reason that we have the relations we do with Cuba is because of trying to appease the large and significant Cuban vote in Florida. Democrats don't really have to care about that anymore because there's no sign that they're going to be winning the state back anytime soon. I mean, that goes with regard to Cuba, goes with regard to Venezuela too. So in terms of the political calculations around this, that has really shifted. That's number one. Number two, I just think it's always important to keep in mind where these reports are coming from. This is clearly a leak by, there's kind of a divide within the Biden administration between people who are more hawkish towards China and people who want more engagement, more diplomacy of the type that was, on display with Tony Blinken traveling to China recently. And this appears to be a leak from the more hawkish quarters to try to secure their policy ends and goals. So keep that in mind with this as well. But the other thing, Saagar, that I think is important to point out here is, when it's us in our country and you have, the possibility of troops from China on nearby soil in Cuba, we understand very clearly how the empire is going to react and how the country is going to feel about that, et cetera. There seems to be a blind spot with regards to our own operations around the world and how, for example, that may have appeared to Russia and raised similar sensitivities. Now, I will say for the millionth time, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was illegal and wrong, and no one is justifying it. But, when you have it close to home, suddenly it's like, oh, this is a problem. We see how this is an issue. But we have far more think of this. So this was actually from the Wall Street Journal piece. They said, listen, the way China views this is they look at Taiwan. We have the U.S. deploying more than 100 troops to Taiwan to train their defense forces. We heavily arm and train that self-governing island, sits right off of mainland China. Beijing sees it as its own. That's about the same distance that Cuba is from Florida. Also, they point out China has no combat forces in Latin America. Meanwhile, the U.S. has dozens of military bases throughout the Pacific where it stations more than 350,000 troops. Chinese officials have pointed this out when they push back on American efforts to counter their military expansion outside of the Indo-Pacific. So I just want to put out there, take yourself out of the American context and think of how China views our actions, think of how Russia views our actions, and I feel like we can garner some more potential understanding of the way they may view what we're doing from this particular provocation.
I think it's an important point, specifically with what you said vis-a-vis Russia. I will say, sometimes I get very annoyed whenever they're like, well, you have troops in Japan. I'm like, yeah, the Japanese want us there. They literally are the ones who are asking us to stay. And, for all the people who are going to throw Okinawa in my face, that's not the only one that I'm talking about. Same with the South Koreans. So it's not like these aren't deep and entrenched allied governments. So we'll put that aside.
But the Cubans want the Chinese there.
But no. And I think that is why it is an important point. And actually, this is very specifically most likely in response to the special military advisors which were sent to Taiwan after the Ukraine invasion. I also would say that one of the things that I have always tried to say here is with regard to aid to Ukraine, whenever it comes to the way that we are sapping so much of our military strength and so much of our geopolitical attention, I just saw this morning, you sent it to me, the Financial Times reporting Jake Sullivan is traveling to Denmark or something like that, in order to try and pressure Indian and Brazilian officials who are also traveling there. The full force of the U.S. government right now is focused almost entirely on Ukraine and on Russia, two countries which their GDP combined don't even make up a single Chinese province. So we have to focus all of our energy specifically on this issue, on navigating and going through this so that we don't end up in a catastrophic situation. And unfortunately, we are obviously being stretched thin. And this is just even more evidence that what was going on in Ukraine is distracting us from any potential even attention at the way that we should be paying, towards China. Second, you can see here Secretary Blinken seems a bit blindsided by the issue, specifically after he left Beijing for his visit. Here's what he had to say.
Made very clear that we would have deep concerns about PRC intelligence or military activities. Both countries see the importance of trying to bring more stability to the relationship.
So he says both countries see more stability to the relationship. I mean, the Chinese are not stupid. They know exactly what this will provoke here in the United States, and they are also trying to get their own policy concessions. So we're stretched very thin all over the world, and it's a problem.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.